Morgan Scalley has one post pinned at the top of his feed on X. It is a quote from the late Latter-day Saint General Authority Marvin J. Ashton that reads, "If we could look into each other's hearts and understand the unique challenges each of us faces, I think we would treat each other much more gently, with more love, patience, tolerance, and care," end quote. On today's episode, it is clear that this is something Coach Scalley feels deeply and has learned in ways that have been incredibly difficult but transformative. Entering his 18th year overall as a Utah assistant coach, Morgan Scalley will begin his 10th season as Utah's defensive coordinator in 2025. In 2024, Scalley was formally designated as Utah's head coach in waiting. He is considered by many to be one of the brightest defensive minds in football. His ability to develop talent has propelled 33 Utes to the NFL ranks, and he has coached 13 All-Americans. A former Utah football player himself, he captained his team as a senior to a 12-0 record, a Fiesta Bowl win, and a number 4 national ranking in a historic season in which Utah became the first non-BCS team to play in a BCS bowl game. After graduating magna cum laude from the University of Utah, he received his MBA. He and his wife Liz are the parents of 3 children. This is All In, an LDS Living podcast where we ask the question, what does it really mean to be all in the gospel of Jesus Christ? I'm Morgan Pearson, and I am so honored to have Morgan Scalley on the line with me today. Morgan, welcome.
It's the Morgan and Morgan show. I've always wanted something like that, you know?
Yes. And maybe if this goes well, we just take it on the road, you know? Yeah, why not? Well, I have been so excited to talk to you. My husband is a huge fan. He is a diehard Ute fan, and he has converted me, which I to be fair, I went to BYU. I did not grow up a BYU fan, so I probably was not the hardest convert of all time. But we love rooting you guys on, and I've wanted to interview for you for a while, and so I'm excited to have the opportunity. But I recognize, Morgan, that talking about faith is not your day job, but this is also not the first time that you've talked about your faith. And so I wanted to start with something that you said about your mission previously. You said football means nothing compared to the work of spreading the gospel. That's the greatest feeling in the world, and nothing we do as football players can compare to that. So I wondered if we could start with what has sharing the gospel meant to you in your life, and kind of how football has allowed you to have an avenue, kind of a unique avenue to share the gospel.
Man, yeah. So I would say, you know, I had a testimony before going on my mission. I did. I read the Book of Mormon. I loved it. I felt the Spirit, knew that it was true before going on my mission, but I just gained such a passion for service and the work of the Lord while in Munich, Germany. And it was not necessarily a very successful 2 years in terms of converts, but you know, I love the German people, and, you know, we did have some great stories, but just my passion for the gospel. And when I was able to be in a situation to help someone feel Christ's love for them, that was the most amazing feeling. And, you know, I think you see that promise throughout Scripture, is that there's no greater thing than bringing someone else to Christ. Well, I say football is not significant, and in the grand scheme of things, it's not. It's been a great tool, a great teacher, a great avenue for me to be able to continue to teach and to share my testimony. It's not something that, you know, I'm not trying to convert kids on the team. That's not what we do. But you'd be surprised how many young men want to talk about faith, want to talk about how we handle certain situations with our testimony and with faith. So I'm grateful for the opportunities God has given me through my profession to bear testimony, to be potentially a light to someone else. And also for me And it's what I love about my job, to learn from others, to learn from young men of different faith and those on our staff of different faith, because they have amazing stories and they have testimonies, and we don't have to not everyone's going to be LDS. We don't live in a bubble, but man, can we learn from each other. And so I'm grateful for those opportunities as well.
I did not prepare you for this, Morgan, so you'll have to forgive me. But as you were talking about learning from people of different faiths and players wanting to talk about faith, it made me think about your team's been through a lot the last handful of years. And I imagine that also opens up a desire to talk about things of eternal importance outside of football.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, anyone that has followed the program knows that we've lost a few young men throughout the years. I think, obviously Ty and Aaron are the two that come to mind. Not a lot of people know about Gaius Vainuku, who really, he passed away before he got to join the team. He was a freshman coming into his freshman year, traveling home before fall camp and passed away in a car accident. So we've had, just tragedy after tragedy. And it is so heartbreaking to talk to those families, to talk to those moms and dads. And each was a different situation, but every single one of them required faith, required connection, required empathy and love to get through, and made us stronger as a team. And for sure, you bet there were conversations about where they go, and being able to see them again, and they're looking down on us. And so, faith, regardless of the denomination, was a big part of getting us through it.
Yeah. Well, I love the way you guys have continued to honor Ty and Aaron with the moment of loudness. If anybody listening has not seen that, you should look it up on YouTube. It's so powerful and so cool. I want to ask you something that's a little bit off the beaten path for the rest of this interview, but I am incredibly jealous because I understand that Elder Maxwell sealed you and your wife, and I love Elder Maxwell so much. And I also understand that he is one of your heroes. So I wondered if you could share kind of why you look up to him so much. Do you have a favorite talk and why?
Yeah, well, Elder Maxwell was the dean of students when my dad went to the University of Utah. And my father wanted to be a dentist. He went to the University of Washington and realized fairly quickly that dentistry was not for him. Came back to the University of Utah, and my grandfather, Ford Scalley, told my dad, "You need to go talk to Neal Maxwell." So he went to Neal Maxwell, and Elder Maxwell sat him down and asked him, "Bud, what do you want to do?" And he said, "Well, I think I want to get into parks and recreation." And Elder Maxwell said, "Bud, no, you don't. You're going to be an attorney." And he got my dad into law school.
Wow.
I think without even taking the entrance exam, or hopefully that's not some big issue now that people are going to come after my dad, but no. And just served as a mentor to my dad, and became strong family friends. And I, in the mission field, gained a love for his way with words. And so I studied him, read so many of his books. I would say one of my favorites is One More Strain of Praise. This was after cancer, but One More Strain of Praise is probably my favorite book that he's written. And then a lengthy talk that he gave, not in conference, but at BYU, is Willing to Submit. And man, does it talk about trials and stuff that you go through, and the refiner's fire, and that being a part of life, and our ability to go through it is, you have to be willing to go through it, willing to submit. And it's not an easy thing, but it's what's required to hear, the words, if it's fair. It's not a true trial. That could be hard to hear.
Hard
right?
to swallow.
Yeah. And so I just loved his view of discipleship and coming unto him and understanding that trials are going to be a part of it. And, just like Elder Holland said, how can we expect it to be easy for us when it was never easy for him? And Elder Maxwell married Liz and I thought it was the neatest thing. I was like, you go from, okay, you've met him and then you go on your mission and you read all about it and he's an apostle and, then you see him in the temple. And I was just like, I don't get awestruck, but I was like, okay, I'm awestruck right now. This is pretty awesome. But just a special family friend. He was very, very gracious to my father.
It's amazing. Well, I want to get a little bit into kind of that idea of trials and trials not always feeling fair or hard. You have 3 teenage children, is that right?
So right now, yeah. So my oldest, Maddie, she just graduated Olympus High School.
Okay.
And she's going to BYU. I'm proud of her. I love her. People always ask, how do you feel about that?
Do you feel betrayed?
Yeah. Like, no, this is her journey. She's not going to play football. I'm excited for her, and she's got good friends that are going there. And I've got good friends that are there. So Emma has her birthday today. And
happy birthday, Emma.
I know, 16 years old. She's going to be out there on the road driving. So she'll be a junior at Olympus. And then Andrew is going to be my 8th grader. He is 13. So 3 teenagers. Okay. You got it.
Okay. We have 2 girls so far, but we have an Emma too. So that's kind of fun. Awesome. You've recently spoke at a fireside that I understand your daughter kind of was able to get you to speak, and
into it, and then she wasn't in there.
Typical teenage girl. Yeah. But you talked about seeking Christ, not perfection. So I wondered, what does that mean for you, and why is it so important that you get that message through, not only, I guess, to your children, but also to the young adults that you work with in your job?
Oh, I just think that, when you read the scripture, be therefore perfect, it's like, I can't, we can't, and it's very difficult. And we live in a world and a society and a culture, even within the church, that we got to say the right things and we got to wear the shirt and tie and show up the right way. And there's certain just unwritten rules and stuff that people follow. And it's like Christ wasn't that way. Christ was, he lived in and with those that struggled, with those that sinned. And he was so kind. And, if we really don't focus on checking the boxes, don't focus on, 100% attendance, 100% this, 100%, just focus on getting to know him. And the more you get to know him, the more you'll understand what it is to really live the gospel. And it's not about policies and checklists and saying the right things. It's about showing up in a very real way and loving and being open and kind and understanding that everyone hurts, everyone struggles, everyone is in need of compassion. The more that we study his life, the more that we really get to know him, perfection will come. Not in this life, obviously, but I'd much rather you, instead of focusing on, well, what are all the commandments I need to follow? It's like you just get to know him and live as he did, and good things will come.
I completely agree. I feel like sometimes we lose sight of that too. I think especially sometimes as members of the church, and I've loved Come Follow Me because I feel like in a lot of ways it's brought Christ back into it. But I think sometimes we lose sight of him as the goal and also as the thing that forgives us for our lack of perfection, and that's the way that it's supposed to be. Morgan, in 2020, as many of us were facing our own racial biases privately, you were forced to face something very publicly, a mistake that you made and have owned. And I wondered if you could share with listeners what that experience was like for you and maybe what you learned from it.
Oh, yeah. Not an easy time at all. And, this was something that complete lack of judgment on my part. And the hard thing is that what I did hurt people, and, you can say, well, the people that know you know that that was not intentional, not what you intended. It's like, well, I get, yes, that's true. But there's people that don't know me that deserve to be hurt by what happened. And so it was very difficult because from a public eye perspective, I was seen as even someone I despised. I despised racism. I grew up in a community of, very, for the most part in Utah, diverse in terms of my best friends were Polynesian. I grew up, I hated, any form of hatred, bigotry, any form of racism. I hated it, despised it. And now I was seen that way based on what I had done. And so, it could have been very easy to sit there and be like, this is unfair. And I didn't intend to hurt anyone. Well, you did, Morgan, you did. And how are you going to respond? You can respond, poor me. You can respond, why is God doing this to me? Or you can, like Elder Maxwell said, swallow the bitter pill without being bitter, partake of the bitter cup without being bitter. And so I delved into showing, because there were a lot of people who really knew me as Coach Scalley, but didn't really know who I was. And for newcomers into our program, for, Mark Harlan, our AD, there's a lot of people that really didn't know me. And so I wanted them to really know who I was, and I was going to own this, and I was going to educate myself. I spent so much time educating myself on the history of racism in our country, on just everything from the civil rights movement to the Civil War, and just a complete diving into the deep end of what I didn't know enough about. But man, did that open my eyes. And this is become such a blessing in my life that I went through this, that it did open my eyes to certain things, to the past and how the past can hurt and how we can move on from the past. We talk to our players about bias, about judgment, about educating ourselves before we respond. We talk in our program about educating yourselves before you jump to any conclusions. We live in a world of instant feedback. I have the ability to respond right away, to react right away by the click of a button on my phone, a like, a retweet, whatever it is. But be really aware of educating yourself before you make these judgments, before you make these judgment calls. Education leads to understanding. Understanding provides for empathy, and which can lead to meaningful action. And so we have these bracelets, EUEA, education leads to understanding, leads to empathy, leads to action. And we talk about it quite a bit, and about educating ourselves on different cultures, different backgrounds, not just, being comfortable in, what we grew up in, but trying to really see things from another culture's perspective. And from that tough time, dark time in my life, I have learned so much that has allowed me to love more and give more and be better.
I think it's interesting how often something like that in the thick of it is so hard. And then you look back later and you're like, that was actually a blessing. And I'm grateful that I went through it no matter how hard it was. Maureen, one question that I didn't think of until you were talking, but I imagine you probably needed quite a bit of support during that time when it felt like a lot of fingers were being pointed at you. And I wondered how was your wife able to be a support to you through that?
Oh, it was super difficult because, understandably so, people didn't want to hear anything. And I just told my family, guys, do not come out and support. Do not say anything. Don't let this thing go through what it needs to go through. And so I think that was very difficult to not stand up and say, hey, you don't know my husband. And so it was, whereas I somewhat had control of my feelings, she didn't. It was really difficult on her and my kids. And I'll never forget my son, Andrew. I was in our study just going through hell. And he just came in and sat down and said, I love you, Dad. And I'm just going to sit with you, and you really learn the difference between sympathy and empathy, as Brene Brown describes it. Sympathy, I feel for you. Man, too bad this is happening to you. We're praying for you. Versus empathy, feeling with someone, really sitting down in their sorrow, being with them, not necessarily saying anything, but just being with them in their pain. And I had some really, really great friends and family members to sit with me during that time. And man, do I have the strongest wife in the world. Liz is amazing. She's going to Celestial Kingdom. I'm just grabbing onto her ankles. Take me with you.
Football's prepared you for that.
Oh man, she's amazing. So I was grateful for her strength during that time.
Yeah. I wanted to ask kind of as a follow-up to that. I feel like you have been such a good example of a member of the church and a witness of Christ. And you've often shared what the gospel has meant to you. So I wondered what it was like for you to feel like you were facing a mistake that you knew was a mistake in such a public way, and maybe what you learned about remorse and restitution and forgiveness from having to confront that head on.
Yeah, well, that's where I read that talk by Neal and Maxwell, Willing to Submit. And those, if you read that talk, it is tough to hear that, hey, you have to go through a little bit of what Christ went through, and it's not going to be fair. And if you think it all has to be fair, and then you're in for some disappointment. And it was really tough to hear those words, but man, did I need to hear them. That trials, if it's a true trial, it's, if it's fair, it's probably not a true trial. That was tough to hear. And I was in a spot where a lot of people were saying, well, you should do this, you should do that, you got to stand up, and the Spirit wasn't telling me to do that. And I needed to educate myself more. I needed to show more love, show more compassion to others. This trial I went through really opened my eyes to others who go through maybe something similar, not public, but just trials they don't think they should go through, just stuff that happens. And it really allowed me to be more empathetic. It made me look at people differently. And there are stuff that, people go through stuff every day. Everyone's sitting in those pews at church and sacrament meeting. We see these pictures on the church website of these families all sitting up and smiling and singing the hymns. And it's like, that's not real.
That's a stock photo.
Yeah. So everyone's going through something. Everyone is struggling. And if we could just open our eyes and understand that everyone needs Christ, everyone needs empathy. And I think we'd be a lot better to each other. And we don't need to act perfect. We just need to be there for people and show up in real ways. I love the church's take on ministering versus home teaching, on really serving people instead of getting a number, right? And that experience really has opened my eyes to understanding and empathy and being there for people during their dark times.
Morgan, you said in a fireside in 2009, the greatest thing we could do today was to partake of the sacrament. It was far more important than anything we'll do as a football team this week. I wondered, when football is in many ways your livelihood and the thing that you likely spend the most time on, how do you keep that in perspective, and how have covenants blessed your life?
Well, I have to always keep in mind, why do I have my job? I do believe that God gives people opportunities not that I was born to be a football coach or a football player, but I do believe that talents are given to people, and how you utilize those talents is important to God. I don't believe that God cares about football, but he cares about football players. He cares about people. And I'm in a situation where I can be an influence on others. And if I don't use my talents to further the work, if I don't use my talents to be a light to others, doesn't mean I have to sit there and baptize people or bear my testimony every day. But the way I live my life is my message, right? It's Gandhi said that. So I'm quoting Gandhi right there. And so I think if you, I'm a gospel doctrine teacher, and if you look at this last lesson, D&C 60 to 63, where God's chastising the brethren traveling back from Missouri to Kirtland, he's saying, why are you worried about how fast you're getting back to Kirtland when people on both sides of the Missouri are perishing from unbelief? You need to be focused more on spreading the gospel. I mean, how many of us are going throughout our daily lives busy as can be, but not noticing the people that are perishing from unbelief beside us? How we use our talents for the good is going to be, we're going to have to answer for it. And so I'm just trying to be the best version of me I can become, so that if people do ask about my faith, about my testimony, I'm ready to bear it.
I want to touch on really quickly, speaking of like being ready to give an answer when somebody asks. I think that is so important, because to your point, like in your job, you're not going to go around trying to baptize players, but you have had teammates or players in the past that have asked questions. And one of those teammates has been on this show, Eric Weddle. And I understand that you had a pretty big role to play in his joining the church, and he is a rock star. So from your memory, I guess, how did that come to be?
Well, Eric had dated. They weren't dating at the time. So Chanel was a soccer player. His wife was a soccer player at Utah State. She was LDS. So he was familiar with the LDS faith. He just got more interested, as time went on. And it wasn't just me. We had a bunch of teammates and good friends of his that were good examples. And but I just remember when we would room together, and I would be reading in the Book of Mormon. What are you reading, dude? And I was like, well, come here. I'll show you. And I think, again, I wasn't the only one that was an example, and Eric was one of those that he had to know. he was so strong-willed, and he was going to figure things out by himself. He was going to be converted regardless, just because of who he was. But what a blessing it was to be a part of that process of helping him come to understand what we were reading in the gospel, and then to see him take the missionary discussions and get back together with Chanel and get baptized and married. And now that guy is such a stud, and what a great example of continuing to be a light to others when, in his profession, and it could be very easy to turn away from that.
Absolutely. In a recent interview, Morgan, you said leadership is influence based on trust you've earned, and you earn that trust through character, competence, and connection. You elaborated in the interview that I listened to on these three things: character, competence, and connection, and kind of what you mean by those things. And that could be helpful to listeners here. But I also wondered, who have been leaders that have been that for you?
Yeah, I've had plenty. That concept of leadership comes from Tim Kite. Tim Kite was worked with Urban Meyer at Ohio State, and I loved studying about leadership. I've loved it just as a player, as a coach. I love reading, and Tim gave a keynote address, an hour-long keynote address. You can find it on YouTube. And it was just an eye-opener. It was the most compact view on leadership, concise, to the point, and it was refreshing. And it was just like, that's it. That's leadership. It's gaining trust. It's getting results. And the gaining trust piece was character, competence, connection. And the results piece was clarity, accountability, and support. And I just thought about the leaders in my life that provided that. And I've had, too many to, you hate to leave them out, but Larry Wilson was my high school, a high school coach that I had that provided that. He was all about the players. He was all about influencing young men, and he was a cusser. And we would go to him and, hey, coach, can we just chill with the language? And so you'd see him out there, and he would be like, gosh, dang it. But you could tell he was trying. You could tell he cared enough that he was really trying. And that's how we knew that he was going to listen, and he was going to do everything he could to love these kids. And so I was grateful for him. Larry Gelwick's another one, Tom Kingsford. All these guys were so good at connecting, and were good men. And so I've had some really good ones: Kyle Whittingham, Ron McBride, who to this day, you talk about a guy that texted me almost every day while I was going through my big trial in 2020. He hit me up every day. How we doing? How you doing, buddy? I'll always love that man. So just those are a few of the examples. The biggest is my dad. And he was the biggest example of facing your trials and doing it, attacking the problem, not hiding from the problem, not turning from the problem, but attacking the problem, facing repentance. And I'm so grateful for him, his willingness to be human. You see your dad as this hero, this superhuman figure that doesn't make mistakes. And my dad made mistakes, and he was willing to own up to it and show me the way. And he showed me the way of repentance. And that's one of the best gifts I ever could have been given.
I completely agree about repentance being one of the best gifts that we've been given. And I wondered, in your role as defensive coordinator, I imagine that you have the opportunity to not only build football players and teach things related to X's and O's, but also to mentor young men and help them become better people. And a big part of that is being okay making mistakes. And so I wondered, how has your experience within the gospel and your knowledge of the atonement of Jesus Christ helped you help your players become the best versions of themselves?
Oh, I just think that as I've grown up in the gospel, I've seen the power of the atonement change people for good. In German, the term for repentance is called Umkehren, and Umkehren is the same word the Germans use for U-turn. And I love that, turning to God. Same thing that Nephi said in 2 Nephi 4, when he talks about, I'm encompassed by the sins that do so easily beset me, right? But then he says, nevertheless, I know in whom I have trusted. He turns to God in his weakness, not away. And, that's what we try and teach our players. We have an acronym. You'll ask our players, what's your culture? They'll say RSNB, relentless, smart, nasty, ball hawks. Well, nasty, the N stands for no excuses. The A stands for attack the problem. So whatever the problem is, and these young men, young women, teenagers, the problems they face were maybe different than the problems I faced as a teenager. But we're very clear with them, okay, what are the problems? Is it marijuana? Is it alcohol? Is it pornography? Whatever the problem is, let's not hide from it. Let's attack it. Let's attack the problem. If we attack the problem, if we don't hide from it, if we're able to talk about it and be vulnerable and attack the problem, that's how we get better from it, not from shame and hiding from it and turning away from it. And so I'm so grateful. We've got such brave, vulnerable men on this team, that have been willing to stand up and be, I have a problem with this. I have a problem with this. Coach, can you help me with this? And we get them with the right people. And I think that's what we need to have in the church. So much of the church is talking about the discipline. Well, if you do this, you can't go on a mission. If you do this, it's this, instead of, hey, if you do this, this is what's happening. This is what's happening to you. Let's attack this problem together and get through it. And so, we teach skill sets and mindsets, a part of this program. If the only skill sets we teach are how to become a better football player, we're failing these young men. And we have to teach transferable skill sets that go beyond the game, stuff that's going to be important when no one cares about what your 40 time is, when you're old enough that no one cares how high you jumped or what. The mindset is that growth mindset that we talk to our players about. Is building a skill takes time and effort. Whatever that skill is, it takes time, takes effort. You have to be willing to invest the time and be tenaciously persistent. I understand that discomfort is part of the process, but if I avoid discomfort, I prevent learning. I will make mistakes and they will teach me. I want feedback and coaching. So that's what we call our growth mindset. And we have our players memorize that. And it's so important for them to know it's okay to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. Let those mistakes teach you. Let's learn and let's grow and let's get better from them. Let's not shame ourselves for them. Let's not go backwards. Let's learn from our mistakes and let's get better. And you have to be willing to embrace discomfort, get out of your comfort zone. And I think that our young men and young women today in the church, man, do we need to do a little bit more of that. Embrace discomfort, get off your phone, talk to people, right? And get out there and serve. And we've got such an amazing youth group in the church. And if we can just embrace discomfort and push the limit, and that's where learning and growth occurs.
Morgan, one thing I was thinking of as you were talking, you've been at the U essentially since you yourself were a player. And you mentioned that what teenagers are facing now, young adults are facing now, is different than maybe what you faced as a player. How have you seen that kind of evolve? And does that help you raising teenagers?
Oh, it has definitely helped me.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, because I deal with teenagers every single day. And,
right.
And the challenges, they do change. I mean, I didn't have social media when I played. You had message boards and stuff like that, but now they just get on their phones and it's there. What's being said about me? What's, and those are challenges, and helping them understand who to listen to, the voices to listen to, and who to block out. And we talk about social media, and we have our guys watch on Netflix, The Social Dilemma, educate themselves on how these platforms are using you. And yeah, you just see, I feel like Alma the Younger, where you go from being the rebellious kid to, hey, now you're teaching everyone else, hey, don't do what I did,
Yeah.
So it's weird now because all the stuff I use, all the movie lines, and now no one knows what I'm talking about. I'm like, okay, that's how I know I'm old, is when none of you, know Dumb and Dumber, or none of you have watched Shawshank Redemption or anything, you know what I mean? So it's just crazy.
I had an experience a couple years ago where I was speaking at a girls' camp, and I had prepared what I thought was like a really good anecdote to lead into the talk, but it was from the movie Walk to Remember. And when I said, like, how many of you have seen A Walk to Remember? It was like crickets. And I was like, oh boy, this is not going to land.
Let's not use this.
Yeah, this is not good. No, but I think, what you said is spot on. And then you throw in NIL and money, and it gets all the more convoluted and complicated. And so I do not envy any teenager. My husband and I say our biggest fear is raising teenage girls. So you're one step ahead of us. So I was like, I have to ask him if that's been helpful.
Oh, there are some good books too. Strong Father, Strong Daughter. That's a good one. The Teenage Brain is a good one to read.
Okay.
Anyway, I love reading, but these are just some of the ones that have been eye-opening to me. And one other that I think members should read that I think is awesome. It's written by a non-member. It's called The Prodigal God.
Okay.
And it's obviously on the parable of the prodigal son, but it's from the vantage point of the other son, the son that
was there all along,
was there and claimed to be faithful. But man, is it eye-opening. It just hits home to members and that may think, hey, I'm awesome. We're good, and I just love that book. But some really good ones on teenagers. If your husband wants to hit me up, you just give me my cell number. And,
Perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I've made a lot of mistakes, and I can let him know all about it.
Perfect. Well, I'm sure that he would love to pick your brain. My last question, Morgan, and thank you so much for being willing to do this and for all of your insights and for sharing your experience as well. My last question for you is the question we ask at the end of every episode of this podcast. And that is, what does it mean to you to be all in the gospel of Jesus Christ?
It means to be ready for anything. It means that, hey, I'm going to face the messy, and to be all in means I'm going to sin and I'm going to struggle, but it means I'm going to square my shoulders and I'm going to turn to God and not away from him. It means that I'm going to remain faithful, even if I don't know the answer, because the answers eventually will come. It means that I need to be a doer and not a hearer only, not just a Sunday Sabbath Mormon, but an everyday member of the church. And it means to understand that we all need Christ, that there's no one perfect out there, and we're all searching to become more like him. So that's what it means to me.
Thank you so much, Morgan. We are so grateful to Morgan Scalley for joining us on this week's episode. Be sure to cheer on Morgan and the Utes this weekend as college football season kicks off. We are so grateful to Derek Campbell of Mix at Six Studios for his help always with this podcast, and we're grateful to you for listening. Thanks for spending time with us, and we'll look forward to being with you again next week.